everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for When I Grow Up. On today's episode, I have special guest David Shin with us. I'm really happy he's here with us today because, like many of you know, David has his own podcast where I had the opportunity to be on with him. But did you know David Shin is not just a podcaster? He actually makes a living doing other things. He's an author. Right?
Yeah.
He's wrote 2 books that you can find on Amazon. But beyond that, we get to find out today what he does day to day. So, hey, David, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I'm very honored to finally be on the When I Grow Up podcast.
No, it is my honor for you to be here with me today. So how have you been?
I've been great. I got to celebrate my daughter's first birthday yesterday, which was
Can you even believe it's been a year?
it flew. Time flies so much when you have a little child. Yeah,
I know.
it was a little sad because I didn't get to invite people like you, like our friends and family. We did it with just immediate family, but it was still a lot of fun. It took a lot of great pictures. So yeah.
Oh man, I wish I could have been there too, but I'm glad that you guys got to do something small at least.
Yeah.
Shirley, your wife, I saw some pictures too, and it looked really amazing. She's awesome,
Yeah.
isn't she?
Yeah. If I can brag on my wife a little bit, she studied mechanical engineering, so she's really handy. And she wanted a backdrop for pictures, and she didn't have anything, so she went to Home Depot, got a bunch of PVC pipe, and she made a backdrop herself with like bed sheets and just putting together. Yeah. So it was great. It was
Oh
a lot of
my
fun.
gosh. Shirley is
Yeah.
crazy in the best way possible.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know David's family and my family that well, actually, Shirley and David are coworkers. They actually work
That's right.
together in the same office. They're both engineers. David David Shin, not my David. David Shin and Shirley and David, they all went to Georgia Tech. And actually, another fun fact about us, David and I are the same age, and Shirley and David are the same age.
Yeah, and when we say same age, we're literally a few weeks apart, both of us.
Oh,
Because
that's right.
I'm a March 88, you're March 88.
Uh-huh.
Shirley and David are July 92.
That's
So
right. That's right.
yeah.
Crazy. But so,
Yeah.
hey, before we talk about what you do on a day-to-day
Mhm.
basis, what you
Mhm.
actually do, can I ask you about, I hope they hear this podcast?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
I'm sure there are so many listeners that like have questions about even you just even deciding to start the podcast itself. At least I'm
Mhm.
curious. What made you start I Hope They Hear This?
The initial thing was, so I don't know if I should be mentioning this on this podcast, but
No,
there was
just
a
say it.
lull. Yeah, I mean, there was like a lull in my actual career.
Uh-huh.
Because when I first went to college, I actually had thought that I was gonna get into art or design, but
What?
I went the engineering route. Yeah, so we
Oh
can talk
my
about that in a
gosh.
bit.
Okay.
So I realized like I want to say 5 or 6 years into my career, I had this like creative itch that I
Uh-huh.
couldn't satisfy because I wasn't doing art anymore. Like art used to be such a big part of my life. I took at least one art class every single semester of my high school career. So for
Really?
4 years, art was a daily part of my life, and suddenly it was gone, and the exciting newness of a career had faded.
Uh-huh.
So I mentally, like, I was looking for something creative for a while, and
Mhm.
that was the genesis of me writing those books. And I thought the natural progression of that was doing a podcast because I feel like I have a lot of opinions,
Mhm.
and what better way to get your opinions out there than to start a podcast, right? And yeah, so that's kind of how it started. It's morphed into something a little different now.
Mhm.
It's become more about community conversations and
Mm.
things like that. The initial thing was just the funny thing is the thing that tipped me over into actually starting the podcast was I saw the Justice League movie, which is for nerds out there, you will know that the movie wasn't that faithful to the comics. Like it wasn't that good. So I think my first episode was addressing the DC EU executives. Like you did a terrible job. You should have done better. And like I just thought if I got a podcast out there, maybe, one day they would listen. So that's kind of how it started.
Interesting. I had no idea that's how it started.
Yep, yep.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, even the title, I hope they hear this. I always really like the premise, like of just, wanting an outlet for your voice to be heard to maybe somebody that you can't reach, but one day you can be able to talk to them if they hear the podcast.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
wow. But I remember when you started, you told David and I that your goal was to have a podcast for each week for an entire year. And when it
Yeah.
came to episode 52, we were like, wow, he like really did it. He like committed to it. And now as a new podcaster, I know that's a lot of work, to like commit to a
Yeah.
podcast each week. So, I mean, I'm thankful for your podcast, David. I don't know
Wow.
if anyone says that to you often, but you should know that our community is really thankful. So thanks.
Wow. No, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Yeah,
And yeah.
of course. Okay, but why people are here on When I Grow Up is to hear about what you do on a day-to-day basis. And,
Yes.
um, I've known you for a little while, and I kind of know here and there what your giftings are and in your workplace, but I don't know actually what it involves. Before
Mm.
the podcast, David, you were telling me that you are in a managerial position, but it's with the supply chain consulting.
Yes.
Okay, what is that? So can you
Yeah.
clarify what that is?
Yeah, I can also let me start by defining what a supply chain is. A supply
Yes.
chain is, I guess, from the consumer perspective, we'll take something, let's say your phone, for example.
Mm-hmm.
When you buy your phone, you just go to the store and you pick it up, right? But
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of work that goes into getting the phone to that store. It's before the store, it's stored at a warehouse somewhere. And then before the warehouse, it's made at a factory. And before the factory, all its individual components are shipped in from a different location. So those chain of events that bring it to the store ultimately is what we call the supply chain. And
Okay.
does that make sense?
No, it does. I'm just like,
Mhm.
yes. Because what I'm learning from all of my interviews is that
Mhm.
like everyone, like someone always has a job to do. Do you know what I'm saying? And like, I just
Yeah.
feel like even you explaining that makes me realize like, yeah, I don't know all the things that go into this phone getting to the store, but there are so
Mhm.
many different parts and so many different people involved. And that's what I've been loving about doing interviews with people is just my eyes being open to the immense amount of opportunities. But anyways, go ahead. Yes,
Mhm.
it makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. And so that flow of movement makes sense if you only have one store or one warehouse, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
that just means you make it, send it to the warehouse, and send it to the store. But for iPhones, for example,
Mm-hmm.
everyone in the country, maybe even everyone in the world wants one. So there's thousands of stores, probably hundreds of warehouses, and dozens of factories.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at it from that perspective, like you don't always really know what the best way to move those products is to so that the final supply chain cost is as cheap as it can possibly be. Yeah. So, for example, if there's a warehouse in California, you're not going to ship the iPhones from a warehouse in California all the way to Georgia, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
only going
Mm-hmm.
to want to ship those iPhones to the stores in the California area. You
Okay.
want to ship the phones from a warehouse, let's say in Tennessee or maybe Georgia, for it to get
Mm-hmm.
to a store that we would go to. And so, what we do as a company is we help other companies
Mm-hmm.
with their supply chain and trying to make it as efficient as possible.
Wow. That's what you do? Okay, so
Yeah.
like what does that entail? Like I mean in my head it's like you have to look at data probably.
hmm Yeah.
Um
So the first thing that well, I also at my company conduct a lot of interviews for recruiting, and one of the most important things that we need to look at is how well does the candidate look at and handle data.
mm,
Because if it's a small store or like a small company, it's not a big deal. Maybe you have a couple hundred records of data, but if you think about like Target, think about how many stores there are, how many products they carry, and how many customers they serve. All of that gets captured somewhere through a database somewhere, and we have to take a look at millions of records of data to try to aggregate it and give us a big picture, like just figure out somehow how to digest that information so that it's usable for a human being, like some because someone needs to make a decision, right? And they can't sit there looking at hundreds of pages of data to say, well, this makes sense. Like we have to somehow make that a big picture statistical number to
mhm.
say, well, 40% of your products go to California,
Mhm.
so all these other warehouses that you have in Nevada or like North Dakota, maybe you
Mhm.
don't need that. But then
Mm.
you can only come to that conclusion if you're able to somehow, yeah, get information from the data that you crunch and handle.
So you said you do a lot of interviews with candidates for your company, but like
Mhm.
how do you even evaluate if someone is able to do that well?
So we actually give them a test. We give them a Excel file
Uh-huh.
with hundreds of thousands of records of data and say, let's see if you can, come to like we ask them a question. Based on this data, what month of the year is the highest sales month? Or like
Ah,
how should we plan? Like things like that.
I
It's
see.
actually not that difficult if you know how to use the tools. Yeah.
I see. I see. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, so what are some examples can you give me that would make, so I'm assuming, the need for a consulting company to come in and help with the supply chain is to make things more efficient
Mhm.
for the company itself, cut costs and stuff like that. Could you give me any examples of how maybe a company was losing money, but you guys were able to find solutions for them?
Yeah, so um, I can't talk about my current projects because we have NDAs,
Yes, please don't do that. Yeah.
non-disclosure agreements. But from several years back, there was a mattress company,
hmm
and what we did for them is so in that case, it wasn't so much about saving money. It was more about, hey, the recession, we're just coming out of the recession, and um, the demand for our mattresses are going up,
Mm,
and all the warehouses were filled with beds because one of the important things that we have to consider in our line of work is inventory. um, if you have all the product at the stores, then there would be no room for customers to walk in, right?
mm.
So there needs to be a fine balance of how much product you have at a store so that it can satisfy the demand versus, not busting at the seams in terms of, the back storage space.
Sure.
Um,
Okay.
and that was what was happening to this company. They were busting at
Mm,
the seams, not just at the stores, but at the warehouses. And so what they wanted us to do is figure out where should they put their next warehouse so that it can alleviate the stress in terms of inventory to those other locations. Because if they randomly just put a warehouse anywhere, then
mhm.
they can lose a lot of money because from the warehouse they have to put it on a truck that goes to the stores, right?
Oh my gosh.
If it's
Yes.
too far away from where the big demand is, like where the largest number of customers are, then they're going to burn a lot of money on paying the
Mm,
truckers. And also, but if you, for example, real estate in Silicon Valley is ridiculously expensive.
yes.
So if you put a warehouse in Silicon Valley, you're just going to burn a lot of money on your lease in terms of your
Mm,
real estate. So you don't want to do that either. So what we do is we kind of test out specific locations for them, and say, hey, if you put it here, it's going to ship to your customers the fastest. So your customers are going to be the happiest if you put it here. But you put it in this other location, it's actually going to be the cheapest for you because, balancing, inventory cost, freight, like trucking cost and like rent cost, and even the cost of like hiring people to work in the
Mm-hmm.
warehouses,
Mm-hmm.
all those things like considered, we can see that the cost is the cheapest in this secondary location. So we give them a lot of different options, and they kind of choose whatever is the best for them. Because some companies, they say, we're willing to spend more money if that means our customers are happier.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other companies that say we cannot touch our bottom line. So the customers are going to have to deal with, whatever unsatisfaction or dissatisfaction that they may have.
That's crazy. So like how do you use like simulators?
So we actually use optimizers.
Okay.
So
What's that?
so what an optimization model is you start with kind of the demand side. So you say um, you must throughout the model somehow from the beginning point to the end point you must move, let's say, 100 mattresses.
Okay.
And then in the model we give it a lot of different options to get to the final like demand point.
Mm.
And the model is going to look at the different options, compare all the costs along the supply chain, like we were talking about,
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
and it'll determine what the cheapest route is.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's our job is the bulk of our job is creating these optimization models. Because once you have
Mm.
the model, it's you just run a lot of different scenarios to
Okay.
get to it. But the challenge is taking the millions of records of data, distilling it to a small enough like number to be able
Right.
to make this model. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So like what does your day-to-day look like then?
Yeah, my day to day is it depends. So because I'm a consultant, we
Uh-huh.
work at a project basis. So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
um, an engagement is typically 3 to 4 months,
Mm.
and the first 2 months is all about looking at the data and cleaning the data.
Mm.
Because one thing that a lot of people don't realize is um, when people put in data at the warehouses or like the truckers put in like where they came from or how much they drove and all this
Oh,
kind of things.
sorry to
Uh,
interrupt real
yeah,
quick. But
yeah,
so the companies do keep track of these things. Like even
yes.
before coming to you, a consulting agency, like they already have this data collected.
Most big companies do,
Okay. Okay.
and most newer companies do. There are some companies that don't because they just don't know that they need to,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
but that's pretty rare. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
I guess if you know what you're doing and making money doing it, you should know that you need this data to make things more efficient. But anyways,
And
okay.
it helps that that data is needed to keep track of their finances,
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
even if they don't care about the supply chain, they definitely do care about how much money they're spending. So thanks to that, we usually have the data that we need.
Okay, good. So, but
Yeah.
you're saying the first 2 months is kind of cleaning up that data that comes in.
Yeah, because the data, it's not like there's a robot putting in the data. A lot of it is people keystroke data in.
Mm.
So one of the first things that we need to do is we need to look at if we're looking at the product sizes. Let's say that a company like um, I don't know, what's a good example. Let's take the mattress company for example.
Mm-hmm.
All of the products is going to be similar size because mattress between a twin size and a California King, it's not a huge difference. But when we see something where the product is 100 times bigger than another product, we have to assume that someone typed it in wrong, and we have to kind of
Ah,
identify those things and remove it from our data so that it doesn't mess up the model that we're trying to run. Because
I see.
the challenge is if we leave those bad data in,
Mm-hmm.
then the results of the model aren't going to make sense. They're going to look
Mm.
at it and say, "Hey, the results of the model are telling me that only a single mattress fits into a truck," which makes no sense. And that's because we failed to identify, those things.
Mm.
Yeah. and clean the data. So so that's why we spend a lot of our time making sure that the data is clean
Mm-hmm.
and that it makes sense to the clients.
Mm-hmm.
So we spend a lot of time just cleaning the data, showing them like a summary of the data,
Mm-hmm.
and then they'll say, "Oh, that looks right," or they'll say, "Wait, that doesn't look right."
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of go back and forth and make sure that the building blocks of the model are all clean and good.
So that's the first 2 months you said. So that last month is kind of
Mhm.
coming to some sort of solution or conclusions about the data itself.
Yeah, so the that's the first 2 months. And then that's where we call it. That's kind of like the midpoint of our project life cycle, where
Uh-huh.
everyone's come to an agreement that the data looks good, that it makes
Okay.
sense, and then we start building the model in the optimization software that
Mm-hmm.
I was talking about.
Okay. Okay.
And once we have kind of the base version of that model, we then start playing around with, let's say that in 5 years your total sales go up 10%. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's that going to do to your costs? And then we can model that now that we have this base version of the optimization. Or like, let's say suddenly everyone in California decides that they don't want to sleep on
Mm-hmm.
mattresses. What's that gonna, and so we cut out all the demand going to California. What's that gonna look like? Yeah, so
Wow.
we call that the scenario visioning process. Yeah.
So you have to like come up with all these scenarios or
Depending on the client, because there are some companies that know exactly what they want to see.
okay.
They have all these scenarios cooked out,
Okay.
but other companies are just like, well, we don't really know what we're looking at, so they're kind of relying on us to be the experts in that situation.
Mhm.
So just based on what we've seen or done for other clients, we'll do something similar.
So, David, you yourself, do you see like a project through from start to finish?
I do. As a manager, I am actually the most engaged with the clients.
Mm.
So the way that our team's structured, I started out as a consultant. That's kind of the entry level position where you're the person who handles the data the most, whether it's in like database software or in the optimization software.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones like kind of like doing all of that. And I have one person above me who's a senior who we call a QA, and that just
Mm-hmm.
stands for quality assurance. They're the ones kind of the senior advisors that like when I can't figure out how to do something, I'll go to him or her, and they'll kind of guide. But I'm the one who's on a weekly basis talking to the clients, making sure they're updated on what we're doing, and all of that. So sometimes the QAs will like drop in and out depending on their availability,
Mm-hmm.
and the analyst might drop in and out based on what they need to be doing. Because near the end of the actual project lifecycle, you don't the analyst can then kind of go work somewhere else because I can manipulate the model myself, and communicate the different types of results that we're getting.
I see. So, did it
Mm.
help then to like work your way up since you have done the different positions?
For
You,
sure, because the unique thing about my company is we have a very specific way that we do things.
ah,
Um, like our slogan is like, um, actually, I don't want to give away where I work, but
okay.
it's just because I don't want them to like, um, I just like really being private.
No,
So
yeah.
I don't want, yeah,
Which is
yeah.
kind of which is
So
kind of weird because I say that because I've realized that being a host of a podcast is a really vulnerable place to be. So I
mm,
so I find it
yeah,
ironic that you would say something like that. But okay, no, of course. I completely understand.
mm,
And I also know that you work with a lot of clients that are bigger companies as well. And on top of that, you have current projects that you sign NDAs for. These are
yeah,
non-disclosures that you're not supposed to talk about it at all.
yes,
So
mm,
but anyway, so you were saying though that there is a certain way you guys do things in your
yeah,
company, and you
yeah.
like that because
It's really the most accurate way to do it. A lot of other companies who consult don't do it this way because they feel like it's not worth the extra effort to get the extra level of accuracy. But our company made the conscious decision to say we want to be as accurate as possible, even if it costs a little bit more money. So when managers come into our company from other companies, they at first don't really understand why we do things a certain way.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah. So the fact that I came up as a kind of entry level consultant,
Uh-huh.
it helps me to guide
Uh,
the consultants, and it also helps me to because I just have a much more firmer grasp on our methodology and things
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so like honestly, David, while you're talking about everything, all I can really think about is is I do feel like your one's mind has to work a certain way in order to do what
Mm.
you do well. Would you agree with that?
It's interesting because our company actually asked us to take a personality test
Uh-huh.
because they recognize that it's much easier for people of a certain personality type to do the work that we do. And the results of the personality test, because, well, we have a lot of different departments that do a lot of different things,
Mm-hmm.
but at least for my department and the work that I do,
Mm-hmm.
we all tend to be like introverts, introverted, keep to ourselves, and highly just analytical thinkers.
Yes, I can
Yeah.
attest to that
Uh,
about you.
yeah,
O- Only because like I feel like so David and I we've been doing ministry together for a long time. I feel it's been a while. Like
yes.
pre-marriage, pre-baby.
Yeah, yeah,
Um and I do know that David you kind of like to play devil's advocate sometimes. Like
I do.
what about this situation? And I'm like, David, just no, but I
But
I appreciate that every time
mm,
and I love it because it really challenges me to think. But I realize that your job requires that a lot.
yeah, exactly. It actually serves me very well in my work to be able to say, well, this is kind of the status quo, but what if this happens?
Mhm, mhm,
And it actually helped a lot during this whole COVID-19 pandemic because no one expected this, and
mhm.
so no one was really like they didn't know how to react to suddenly nobody buying anything, nobody going to restaurants and things like that. But the way that I build my optimization models,
Mhm.
it's built so that it can, even of the craziest circumstances, you can adjust it to model what that would look like. So we were just able to take our models and say, hey, all this demand dropped out. We adjusted our model, and this is now what your, you know, costs are look like. And clients really appreciate that because they had no idea to even think about considering this.
Wow, that's valuable.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
For the clients, yes.
yeah, no, it is. I'm like, wow, that's crazy valuable because I mean, yeah, no one expected COVID-19 to happen. And
Mhm.
I know that you work from home regularly, right? Um,
Yeah.
how is that like?
So, and that's another thing about the personality type for this kind of
Uh-huh.
work is you spend like a lot of your days end up just being you looking at the computer screen and trying to decipher what the data is trying to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So, like people who tell me that they're going stir crazy because they're having to work from home,
Mm-hmm.
like I can't really relate, because that's where I thrive. And so,
Um,
like, if you're someone who can't really just sit down and like try to decipher things like
mhm.
logically, for hours on end, this job wouldn't be that exciting for you.
Mm,
And I think that applies to most data analyst jobs.
mm.
You have to have a certain amount of like problem solving, puzzle solving kind of side, where you can kind of go long stretches without necessarily having a lot of interaction with other people.
I see.
Yeah.
Not for me. This
Yeah.
job is not for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
I feel like David would be good at this job, though. Your husband.
yeah, I can see that. I think he would like that. I mean, I think COVID-19 has definitely like shifted his um just thought process of, wanting to work from home, things like that. He's really enjoyed it. But now
Mm.
he's back at the office. But um I wanted to ask you about, just taking us back. Like, there's no major in college for this, or is there?
Um, yeah, I mean, I can kind of take you through. Should I kind of go through my journey of how I got here?
Yes,
And I
please.
can answer
Please.
those questions along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I alluded to, I actually kind of got into where I am on accident, and it was because I couldn't do art. In high school, all throughout, I took art classes. And for those of you who don't know, when you want to go to art school, you have to prepare a portfolio
Mm-hmm.
of a lot of different things, right? I actually had my portfolio ready. I even sent out a few applications to art schools.
What? I'm like
Um,
so shocked, David. Okay, yes,
yeah,
keep going.
and uh, at the last minute, my brother kind of convinced me out of it. And it was just stability wise. He said, "Hey, like we grew up pretty well off. We weren't rich, but we didn't really ever struggle financially." And he said, "I know that's the kind of lifestyle you're used to, but art is extremely competitive, and if you don't have that passion, you might not. You might find yourself in a situation where know, where you don't want to be in.
Mm,
So that kind of scared me. And so I started looking at other programs.
mm,
And at Georgia Tech, there's actually an industrial engineer or industrial design major, which is heavily arts focused, right?
mhm,
It's
mhm.
you're designing products, all those kind of things. So I said, that's like similar enough to art. So let me try that out. And then even that, my brother said, "Hey, that's still very competitive, and I know you're very good at math." Um, I mean, let me brag a little bit. I actually got 800 on my SAT math section, so I'm a very math kind of guy to begin with.
Okay.
So my brother said, "Why don't you look into engineering?"
Mm.
And so I said, "Oh, there's actually an industrial engineering." And I thought they were related. I thought industrial design and industrial engineering were related. Turns out they're not at all. Uh, but because of that initial interest, I said, "Yeah, I'll look into industrial engineering." And the whole concept of that major is um, optimizing things. It's not necessarily just in the supply chain side,
Oh,
but it's looking at different types of systems to cut costs and make it more efficient. So yeah,
wow.
I
I had no idea that's what industrial engineering was.
Yeah, yeah. Not a lot of people know. It's people call it like imaginary engineering because you're not really engineering anything.
Like as a
You're just
joke,
trying to
they
like
call it that?
yeah, because
Oh.
industrial engineering is IE for
Uh-huh,
short at
uh-huh,
Georgia Tech,
uh-huh.
and all my other real engineering friends would call it imaginary engineering. Yeah,
It's not
but
imaginary, but
uh, so that's kind of at least at Georgia Tech, that's kind of the closest major to be able to do the work that I do.
mm,
But I think now, because this was what 10 years ago, but I think
mm.
now there are actual programs that are dedicated to supply chain. And I know at Georgia Tech,
Oh,
in the industrial engineering major, there are different like concentrations, and there is a supply chain concentration.
really? I
hmm
wonder how that came about. Like,
So I think this is my theory. I think after the 2008 recession,
uh-huh.
a lot of companies, a lot of bloated companies, realized that they were burning a lot of money that they didn't need to. Like they had the sense that we're spending way too much money, but they couldn't quantify it.
Mm,
And that's where supply chain consultants really are useful because we can quantify, how much money they're actually spending that
mm-hmm,
doesn't need to be spent.
mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of when it blew up, and even at Georgia Tech, they have a entire master's degree dedicated to just the supply chain too.
Do you feel a master's is necessary in your line of work?
My company, and I think a lot of companies now, they only really interview people who do have the master's degree.
Oh,
I don't have a
really?
master's degree. Yeah, I just have the undergrad. But I know a lot of your previous guests have said this, but it's so true. Networking is the key because even though I don't have a master's degree, one of my coworkers from my previous workplace, um, we worked together. He moved to the company that I'm at now, and there he said, "Hey, I know a friend who would do this work well." And through that reference, I was able to come into this company without having any sort of a master's degree. And it helped that the work that I did at my previous company was somewhat similar. So I had
Mm,
really strong data analysis skills. I mean, that
hmm.
transferred really well to this new company.
Nice. So, after you graduated college, what was like looking for a job? Like what was that experience like for you, David?
Yeah, it's a lot of praying and a lot of God opening doors.
Mm.
Because So I'll disclose where I worked at first. I worked at UPS, the United Postal Service. No, United Parcel Services. It's United Parcel Services. It's not part of the government. A lot of people confuse it with
Uh-huh.
USPS, but UPS is the brown truck company. And my GPA coming out of Georgia Tech was horrendous. Even for a techie, my GPA was a 2.4, which means that throughout my college career, I got more C's than I got B's.
Uh-huh.
So my grade was really bad, and I had zero internships. Most people, they have internships that they do throughout the summer. They have some sort of work experience. I had none of that. But my last semester of college, I like really woke up and said, if I keep doing this, I'm not going to be able to get a job. So the very last project that we do, it used to be called senior design. It's now called capstone project.
Mm-hmm.
For the industrial engineering major, they partner you with an actual company to do a project for them. To do some sort, they'll come to us with some sort of question, and we'll use what we learned in our major to kind of help them figure that out. And that company for us happened to be UPS.
Mm.
And during that project, because we worked so closely with the company UPS, that person, the kind of the representative of UPS, saw like my work ethic, and when we finished the project, he was really happy with what we did, and he actually extended job offers to 3 out of 7 people in our group because he
Oh,
was really
wow.
happy with what we did. Yeah. And so even for UPS at the time, if you go on their website and try to apply to a job, it says like 3.0 GPA minimum. So if I had tried to apply without having done that project with them, they wouldn't even have looked at my resume. But because you know, thankfully the guy, I don't know, saw my work ethic, whatever it was. He said I like it, and yeah, and then that's how I got the job.
Wow, that is God's providence.
Yes, for sure. Because yeah, it's man. Can I tell a story about the senior design project?
No, yes, please
It,
do. I was going to ask you anyways, and I was going to ask you to
Mhm,
elaborate because, like I said, my husband David went to tech, and I know that that senior project, the capstone project, is a really big deal and it does
mhm,
open a lot of doors. So I was going to ask because it's like a real thing. It's not a fake
yeah,
issue. It's a real issue
yeah,
and they expect
mhm,
you guys to solve it, which I think is a great opportunity for the
yeah,
company and for tech, right? Because company they just
yeah,
get free labor, right?
yeah, exactly.
But yes,
Yeah.
please tell me the
So
story.
the process of even finding a company, it's not like the school says, well, this is a list of the like companies, do it. It's you actually have to go out and find your company. So either through companies that you might have interned with, or people that you know, whatever it may be, you have to go to them and say, "Hey, our school has this program, and we have a senior advisor, a professor who knows what he's doing. So like, you don't have to worry about us messing everything up." And you kind of have to be interviewed by the company,
Mm-hmm.
and we also have to kind of interview the company to make sure that it's a type of project that we can actually do. So the project itself is only a semester, but you have to start the process the previous semester because you have to have a project selected by the beginning of the semester to in order to complete it. So
Oh.
that previous semester, the whole time, we went to a dozen interviews. Like we had to dress up and everything, bring our resumes, and say, "Hey, like we would really love to work with you guys," and send follow up emails and all that. But there was one particular company that we interviewed with, and I sent out an email, a really enthusiastic, "Oh, we would love to work with you. You guys are great. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for talking to us." And a week after that, one of our group mates said, "Oh, the UPS, he had interned there, and he said the company that I interned with, they have this big project for us, and I think it's right up our alley." And honestly, the other companies that we were talking with, they're kind of smaller companies. So in terms of employment prospect, we thought UPS was best.
Mm.
So we went with that. So I had to send another email to the other company saying, "Oh, sorry, we found a different company. Um, it was great talking to you, but we're not choosing you," pretty much. And this one particular company hated that. So they had interpreted my kind of follow up email as, "We are choosing you." I didn't use those words exactly. I didn't say we like want to like we're deciding to work with you. We just said we're very enthusiastic. We're looking forward to hearing back, right? But they, because they had thought that we said yes, um, they got super upset when we said no. He contacted the head of the senior design project, and I had to go in and like talk to my senior, like the head faculty member, to kind of explain ourselves. And the guy, like the head faculty member, he was very upset because he said, "You're jeopardizing the relationship that we have with this company. They're probably never going to want to do a senior design project with us
Oh my
again."
goodness.
And they even moving forward. I asked, actually, my brother-in-law is 2 years younger than me, and he is industrial engineering major as well.
Uh-huh.
He told me that 2 years after this, they had put up the email that I wrote. I mean, having censored out all the names and all that kind of stuff, as kind of an example of, you do not want to do this.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, just from the beginning of the project, like it was such a crazy, like I've already messed up,
Oh
kind of
man.
just demoralizing experience. But thanks to the grace of God, I kept my motivation level up, and yeah. So yeah.
It's not funny, but that's so
No,
funny.
it is. It is funny. It is funny. Yeah.
I can't believe they use your email as an example.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it's a good example. You definitely don't want to do what I did. Yeah.
That's
But
crazy.
a lesson in there though is our group got called in to talk to him, and he said, "I'm gonna have to take a letter off your final grade. So like if you deserve an A, I'm gonna give you a B." And I had to say, "Well, I'm the one who wrote the email. I sent it out. So can you just penalize me because my group mates didn't do that?" And he really liked the fact that I fessed up, and tried to take responsibility for it because he ended up not doing that at the end.
Oh, thank
So
goodness.
honesty is key. Yeah, yeah,
But yes,
yeah,
integrity and taking responsibility, I think, is a great piece of advice from this story, too.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
that's so funny, David. But I'm glad everything worked out. So you got the
Yeah,
job at
yeah.
UPS,
Hmm.
and then you
And
mentioned that a friend of yours that went to the company you currently work at is who recommended you for this job.
yes, yes,
Okay.
that's correct. Mhm.
Okay. So, I mean, you know, do you see yourself, I don't know if I should ask this. Do you see yourself continuing in this line of work or
Yeah, so kind of one of the moral dilemmas that I have with this job is, if you really think about it, my job is to either take away someone else's job or reduce the wage of someone else's job. So the success in my line of work is measured by how much money we're saving, right? So
right?
that's money being taken away from other people that could be getting it. So there was a moment because that's kind of the work that I did at UPS too.
Mm.
So there was a moment where I was like, do I really want to be doing this?
Mm.
Kind of the big kind of turning, well, not a turning point, but the wake up call was at my current job. We got data from Mexico because one particular company had a factory in
Mm.
Mexico, and so we got all the financial details, and we looked at some of the wages of these people in Mexico,
Mhm.
and I was like, wow, we're this company is basically using slave labor.
Mm.
Like I can't believe these people survive off of these wages. And
Mm.
I really had a moment of kind of like anxiety of like, oh, does God really want me to be doing this type of work? But the way that I think after that kind of moment, God gave me a lot of reassurance that you know the work that I'm doing can be interpreted that way, but a different way to interpret it is by saving money, right? It's you don't want to be paying people for doing things that aren't necessary. Like you would never just like God, like wants people to work, wants people to be productive,
Mm.
and if a company is being irresponsible with the money,
Mhm.
then that can have a resounding effect to the rest of the economy, right? So that's kind of how I've been reassured. But yeah, it's still every day. Still though, there are moments where I say, "Is there something I can be doing productive?"
Mm.
So I kind of go back and forth. Right now, I'm happy at my job because my the clients that I'm supporting now, they're actually growing. So we're having to decide for them where to add additional jobs.
Okay.
So I'm happy now, but we'll see.
Nice. Would you say that that's maybe one of the bigger obstacles that you faced or realizations that you faced in your current job?
Yeah. I mean, because everything else is great. I know on my podcast, I talk about how like I don't like my job and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, um, like I feel like for what I do, I get paid really well.
Mm.
Um, I don't work like crazy
Mhm.
hours as much. I used to at the beginning, but nowadays I at most work 40 hours a week. So that gives me a lot of time with my family.
Mm.
Um, and the things that I do, I think are genuinely interesting. Like it's a lot of problem solving, which I really like. So yeah, I think that's kind of the only obstacle, kind of moral dilemma I
Mhm.
have sometimes. Yeah.
That's so insightful because I think I did not think of that at all. But yeah, that makes
Mm.
perfect sense that someone along the way has to be, I was going to say the word eliminated, but that's not the right word.
Yeah. Well, like you have to prune the trees that aren't producing fruit sometimes to make room
Mm,
for additional growth. That's kind of how I justify.
no,
Is it justifying?
that is a very good example, I feel like.
Yeah.
Um, so we are coming up on our hour together, David.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, but I was wondering before we go, do you have any advice for somebody that maybe wants to go into industrial engineering or just personal advice that you could give people that are listening?
Yeah. I, I I echo a lot of the things that your previous guests have said.
Mm.
So if you haven't, guys, go listen to all the previous episodes because there's all those pieces of advice I want to echo. But I think one really big thing is you really I mean, I know that not all your listeners might be Christian, but for me personally, being rooted in Christ is really what saved me during this work.
Mm.
Because I realize I struggle with anxiety sometimes,
Mm.
and I think it started with like the whole moral dilemma I was talking about, and also with the 2008
Mm.
recession. Stability was kind of a question. So there are days where I kind of find myself paralyzed because I think if I mess this up, I'm gonna get fired, and
Mm.
I'm not gonna be able to provide for my family, and my baby's just one, but she's gonna have to face the harsh realities of life and all these things. And that's just because of the way that I think.
Mm.
But yeah, really having Christ to turn to in those moments, and really seeking peace from Him
Mm.
and seeking comfort from Him is really what's helped me move along. And not in, I mean, that's like the number one thing, but also having my church community with me. Um, there was one time, right before I left UPS,
Mm-hmm.
I gave a testimony at my church about how much anxiety I was having at UPS, and because UPS was my old boss was the worst. My current workplace is really like the best compared to UPS, but I actually like cried in front of my entire entire like church family, giving this testimony about like how like I feel like I'm gonna ruin my life and all these kind of things, and like they really came around me to like support me and congratulate me on my new job and things like that. So like if I feel like if I didn't have that, like I would just be in such a darker place because yeah, like I mean, there are a lot of like things that you struggle with in the world where that's seemingly separated from Christ, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like reminding myself of like Jesus's place in my life. I mean, always focusing on Him and always knowing that I can go to Him in prayer with whatever issues I have. Yeah, that's what's kept me going.
Mm.
Sorry, was that too much for this podcast? I
No,
don't
that
know if
was the best
that.
advice. That's really good advice that I resonate with well. So thank you for sharing that
Mm,
with our listeners and even with me because I need to be reminded of those things as well sometimes. I think it's been hard just in quarantine, not just not being around the community I'm used to being around. Zoom calls help, I guess, but I think that just the physical, I'm just I need tangible things in front of me kind of person. And so I've missed that a
mm,
lot. So I think what you're saying is absolutely true. You need people around you that are speaking life into your life and truth
yeah.
and telling you the truth, not just saying
Hmm.
things to make you feel better, but really just telling you the truth. So, thank you
Yeah.
so much, David, for sharing all that.
Yeah.
One quick question before we sign off together is you're saying that, the book and the podcast have been kind of your art outlet, your creative outlet.
Hmm.
I mean, do you think you'll ever go back to doing, you know, the things that you thought you would be doing in high school?
Um, honestly, no. And
Okay.
well, but like I want to, because I used to think that that was like a tragic thing.
Uh-huh.
There was a part of me that held on to this resentment, like toward my brother and my parents who really wanted me to get into this other profession. But I'm realizing that being in the career that I'm in now, like I have so much freedom to do things that might not be artistic, but like in the periphery that I hadn't considered. So like I said, like I mean I get paid really well for what I do. And
Mm,
so I get to help my parents a lot,
mm,
who had to, declare bankruptcy after 2008 recession. So I mean they're doing fine now, but I get to help them out a lot.
mm,
I get to spoil my daughter and my wife. And because I work from home, I have all this extra time to, write books and to record podcasts, right? Those artistic outlets that I feel, satisfy my artistic itch anyways, my creative itch anyways.
mhm.
So in a kind of roundabout way, I think God helped me realize, and also, honoring your parents. I feel like these days, people in our community think you either have to choose happiness or honoring your parents and kind of doing what they want you to do.
Mm.
But I feel like I found a very healthy and happy middle ground because I'm honoring my parents by having a stable income, but I also, yeah, have the freedom to kind of do things outside of this career that help me satisfy what the things that I want to do. So
Yes, I
all that
love
to say,
that.
yeah,
I feel like
yeah, all that
that's
to say, I don't think I'll go back. Yeah.
okay. I was
Mhm.
just curious because honestly, that piece of information about you, David, was really surprising for me. I had no idea that that's kind of the trajectory that you had planned, but it shifted. And for me, this podcast alone is that's kind of what I want to hear. The stories of how things started and then it's shifting and doors opening and you being where you are today. So I really appreciate your vulnerability today with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Um, if you have not checked out that, I hope they hear this podcast, please. This is my shameless plug. Please do so
Thank you.
because
Thank you.
David is really good at making people feel comfortable and talking about things that are relevant and the opinions that come out of it too. I think, well, there are a lot of episodes that are just really fun to listen to. There are some more serious ones to talk about more serious topics, but all of them, I know that I come out of listening to them with more knowledge and a different way of thinking. My perspective is open a little bit more than it was before. So I highly recommend go check it out. I hope they hear this. But David, thank you so much for your time today. If you have any questions about industrial engineering or just any comments about our conversation today, I want to encourage you to reach out to us at podcastwigu@gmail.com, WIGU, or just DM us. That's fine too. Until next time, guys. Bye.